introduction. There we go. There's the slide that I wanted up. Welcome everybody to this evening's presentation. My name is Gail Olson, and I am the events chairman for Wild Ones Appalachia Highlands. Tonight, I'd like to just give you a very brief introduction of who Wild Ones is before I move on to our speaker. Wild Ones itself is a national nonprofit organization. It promotes the use of using native plants in our landscapes. The local component of that is Appalachia Highlands, which is the chapter that's hosting this tonight. And we cover Northeast Tennessee to Southwest Virginia. Typically, we have monthly programs such as this evening's, and usually they are open to the public. We have a couple of plant swaps, and if it's a private home tour, that may be closed only to members. But if this sounds interesting to you and you'd like to find out more about us, or possibly even join us, I've listed here some websites and ways that you can find out more about us. Our website, I suggest that you look at some of the tabs up there. We have a resource tab where our committees have put together some really good information for local area gardeners. And we also list our upcoming events on that page. Our next event will be the Randy Smith Seed Swap, and that's going to be February 28th at the Higher Ed Center in Abingdon. And there'll be a panel of 4 speakers talking about native plants. I'm not sure. Brent, can you possibly mute yourself? I think you're still coming through. Okay. And we will also have a table there that will have, we'll be giving away free native seeds to anybody who comes by. So be sure and come by and visit us. Other ways I have listed there, I have our email address, our Facebook page. I invite you to join our group there on Facebook. And we also have a YouTube channel. And so anytime we have a program like tonight where we are recording it, we will upload it to our YouTube channel. With that, I'd like to go on to our speaker for tonight. If you can go on to our next slide there. Thank you. I'm very excited about this. First, let me do a little bit of housekeeping. If you have any questions about for our speaker tonight, please put it in the chat box and we will address it at the end of her talk. So with that, let me please introduce Alaina I'm going to mess this up, I'm afraid, Krakowiak. Did I do well?
Pretty
I think
close.
I got it. Krakowiak. Is that good? She is with the Krakowiak. Krakowiak?
Just say the W like a V.
Okay, Krakowiak. Thank you. Sorry about that. She is the Central Appalachia Grasslands Coordinator and Ecologist for the Southeastern Grasslands Institute. She worked with a variety of partners to study, restore, and advocate for the conservation of grasslands throughout her region. And with that, I will pass it on to Alaina.
Thank you very much. I'll go ahead and share my screen. If everyone could please mute themselves, I would really appreciate it. All right. So the title of my talk is Virginia's Grasslands, Past, Present, and Future. So my name is Alaina Krakowiak. I work for the Southeastern Grasslands Institute as the Central Appalachian Grasslands Coordinator, as was already said. A little bit about SGI. We are a conservation organization based out of Austin Peay State University in Clarksville, Tennessee. We have a number of remote offices across our region, including in Roanoke, Virginia, which is where I am based. So we do a lot of different kinds of projects at SGI. What my team spends a lot of time doing right now is restoration and reconstruction projects on both public and private land. But our team also does work with plant inventory, rare plant surveys, and monitoring projects, and we also do native seed collection. We've been around since 2016, and since then we've grown from a staff of 2 to nearly 60. So we're always hiring and got exciting things happening. So in 2012, Reed Noss published his book called Forgotten Grasslands of the South. This book was part of the original inspiration for SGI. Reed is now part of our staff. I would highly, highly recommend reading this book to get the full story on Southeastern Grasslands. But what I'll do now is just give you a bit of a primer. So to start out, you don't have to actually close your eyes if you don't want to, but in your mind's eye, I would like for you to imagine a grassland. When you hear the word grassland, what do you think? So I would guess that you pictured something like this. This is the tall grass prairie in the Great Plains. This is the most well-known system of grasslands in our country. So most of us were taught early on that grasslands exist in the Midwest and Western US, and that there is a line somewhere in this area where the tall grass prairie transitions to continuous eastern deciduous forest. If you've ever seen an SGI presentation, you're probably really sick of seeing the squirrel, but we always have to share the story, the myth of the squirrel. Some of us were taught this, that a squirrel could go from the Atlantic to the Mississippi River from tree to tree without ever touching the ground. So at SGI, we are trying to abolish the myth of the squirrel forever. So it's true that there is a line where grassland is the dominant habitat type due to precipitation, but that does not mean that grasslands don't exist in the Southeast. In fact, Southeastern grasslands are more diverse and more ancient than the tall grass prairies in the Midwest because they were never glaciated. So we all know that we have more than enough rain in the Southeast to sustain a forest. So how are Southeastern grasslands even able to persist? Well, they require disturbance in many forms. So their natural wildfire was a huge one. Large grazing and browsing mammals, so bison and elk, used to be abundant in our region, and also cultural burning by indigenous people. I skipped ahead a little bit too far there, but just to continue with my previous thought, in many places in the Southeast, you can kind of consider grasslands and woodlands to be alternative stable states. So that means that in a given location, the plant community could kind of go either way towards an open habitat or a closed habitat, depending on whether or not the appropriate disturbance is there. So in the lack of all those disturbance methods that I listed previously, a lot of our habitat has turned into a closed habitat. So if these grasslands were forgotten and there's not a lot of them left, how do we know that they ever existed? This is kind of a contentious point in the science world still. So we look to history for clues of grasslands. We can look to deep time. So we can look at charcoal records that show a history of fire in the Southeast. We can look at pollen cores that show the differences in plant communities over time, and they can show when there were less trees on the landscape. We also have fossils of grassland animals in the Southeast, like prairie chickens and even ground squirrels, which are animals that we associate a lot more with the Western prairies. But more recent history is telling too. So there are historical land surveys that we can look at that have clues when it comes to the spacing of trees that they describe. the kinds of trees that they describe on the landscape, like post oak, blackjack oak, and shortleaf pine. We can also look to old place names. So some Virginia examples would be like Elk Garden or Meadowview or Caney Creek, which would be talking about river cane. Strawberry Plains, Tennessee, that's also kind of in y'all's region. So I would recommend keeping an eye out for names like this, and I think you will be surprised how many there are around. In fact, the historical name of the town of Roanoke was Big Lick, which refers to a historical salt lick that used to be in downtown Roanoke, which would have been like an open, marshy saline habitat where these big grazers like bison would have been hanging out in abundance. So additionally, some of our best clues come from historical quotes, like this one from botanist Thomas Nuttall. He was on the Grand Prairie in Arkansas. Here's a photo of that site, which is amazing. He said, "Here a vast prairie opens to view, like a shorn desert, but well covered with grasses and herbaceous plants." So, got a few more of just my favorite examples. Just as a side note, SGI is currently working on creating a website where we've got all these different quotes and pieces of evidence mapped. So we will have more examples from Virginia. We've actually got a historian on our staff that's working on this, but that is still a work in progress. So I look forward to when we can share that with the world. So I'll just share the last part of this quote that I really love. Here the wild strawberries grew in such profusion as to stain the horses' hooves a deep red color. So I just think that's lovely that that quote is from the Pennyroyal Plain in Kentucky. And this is just a quote describing the Cumberland Plateau in Tennessee, describing the native grasslands that used to be there and all the native animals that used to be there too. So we have lost upwards of 90% of our southeastern grasslands. Some types are 100% gone. Where did they go? So we like to describe the three fates of southeastern grasslands. So this is very much painting with a broad brush, but in general, meadows or more fertile types of grasslands have been converted into pastures. They've been planted over with fescue, overgrazed with cows, or the wettest ones have been tiled and drained. Our open woodlands and savannas have, in many cases, become more closed canopy, low diversity forests. And then our drier prairies have often been converted into crop fields or used for urban development. Our large grasslands were lost really so early on in the nation's history that they hadn't even been photographed or painted. So just to share with you, I'd say this is SGI's favorite artist, Philip Giras. He creates these amazing paintings that are sort of reimagining what the landscape would have used to look like. So this is in the Eastern Highland Rim of Tennessee. He just pulled over on the side of the road and took a photo, and then using expert input from botanists and local history, he recreated that scene, what it would have looked like in the past, which I think is really amazing. So there are some grassland remnants left, though. So I'm going to get into what a grassland remnant is and the kind of places you can find them. So we talk a lot in the conservation world about old growth forest. Well, there are old growth grasslands too. So the grassland remnants we still have on the landscape are old growth habitat, and they are found in places that have somehow managed to evade the wrong kinds of disturbance, like plowing or things that would have destroyed them forever. But they have also managed to receive the right kind of disturbance. So like I said before, grasslands do need some disturbance to maintain their open habitat. So some examples would be land that was, well, sorry, let me get into that a little more. So that would be land that was never plowed or heavily developed, places that are kept free of excess woody vegetation via different kinds of disturbance. So that could be mowing, burning that might not even be intentional, say like on an army base. And then we can also find remnants in places with extreme soil conditions of different kinds that just naturally limit tree growth. So I've got here an example of a rural cemetery in Kentucky, and this area was never plowed and it's mowed pretty irregularly. So it receives that just right amount of disturbance to persist. And then here's an example of a different kind of remnant that persists because just the nature of the soil keeps it in an open state. So this is a Central Appalachian shale barren. And I'll talk a little bit more about shale barrens later on. So something I always like to explain is that there is a difference between remnant and ruderal grasslands. So like I said, remnant grasslands are scraps of truly old growth habitat. They're characterized by having a high diversity of native species, and they especially have what we call conservative native species, which are native species that grow in high quality habitat and don't really have a high tolerance for anthropogenic or human-caused disturbance. Ruderal grasslands, on the other hand, are early successional plant communities. They're the kinds of communities that quickly assemble after a major disturbance. So they are characterized by more weedy, generalist native species like tall goldenrod or dogbane, wingstem, broom sedge, and also usually a high percentage of non-native invasive species. So that first picture I had on there was an example of a remnant. And then this is more just a typical old field with broom sedge. Broom sedge is native, but this is not a true grassland remnant because we just don't have that diversity. So now I want to get into the types of grasslands that we have in Virginia. I think that's really what we're all here to learn about. So you all are probably already familiar with this, but I just wanted to start out by talking about the physiographic regions of our state. And I recognize that you all's chapter does go beyond Virginia, but that's where I'm going to stick with today. But the surrounding states have similar physiographic regions. So first of all, I'll say that SGI does define grasslands with a very broad brush. We consider grasslands really just to be any kind of habitat that is open and not dominated by trees. So they can have some trees. We would consider a savanna to be a type of grassland. So I'm going to talk about different types of grasslands across the state of Virginia, moving from west to east across these different physiographic regions. So I'm located in Roanoke, which is in the Ridge and Valley. I imagine a lot of you are probably also in the Ridge and Valley, but I'm not sure. So hopefully after some of these examples, if someone ever asks you in the future to picture a grassland, you will visualize something much different. So I wanted to start out with, oh, I meant to say one more thing. I'm sorry about the physiographic regions. I wanted to say that the parts of Virginia that would have historically had the most extensive grasslands would have been in the flatter parts of the state, like in the Piedmont and Coastal Plain, as well as in the Ridge and Valley in the flatter valley bottoms. So just to kind of orient you there. The grasslands in the mountains would have naturally been smaller and patchier, but nevertheless, they were and are still very important spots for biodiversity. So just to start out with kind of a fun, weird one, this is what we like to call vertical grasslands. So this picture was taken at the Cumberland Gap National Park in Lee County, Virginia, which is in the Appalachian Plateau region. So we would describe a vertical grassland as grassland vegetation that occurs on a cliff face or on a ledge midway down a cliff face. So I got the opportunity to explore these vertical grasslands in the Cumberland Gap by rappelling down to them. It was a really, really fun project. So vertical grasslands are a kind of grassland that just by the extreme nature of their soil and their qualities, they are able to remain open and treeless. They're not immune to invasive species, but at least obviously they have not been used for development. So here's another picture of a vertical grassland plant. This is the roundleaf catchfly. Another thing about vertical grasslands is that depending on the geology, you will have very different flora. So that first picture was on limestone, and then this is a sandstone cliff. So next, still in Southwest Virginia, we've got limestone woodlands and barrens. So this photo is from the Cedars State Natural Area Preserve in Lee County. This is in the Ridge and Valley. So this habitat type is pretty rare in Virginia. We don't have as much limestone, say, as states like Tennessee do. But interestingly, we do these our limestone woodlands and barrens do share some similarities to the limestone glades of the Nashville Basin. For example, the running glade clover, Trifolium calcaricum, is globally endemic to just Middle Tennessee and then also Lee County, Virginia. So it's got a really interesting disjunction. And there's a lot of rare species in this habitat type in Virginia. Here's another example of more of a barren. This is on a steep slope versus being flat. This is at Cleveland Barrens in Russell County, Virginia. Beautiful Indian paintbrush in the spring. So next, this I'd say is my personal favorite grassland type in Virginia, the shale barrens and also shale ridge balds. So shale barrens are extremely steep and crumbly and just, again, naturally do not favor tree growth. They have a lot of really cool endemic species, including multiple endemic clematis species. That is my favorite genus of plants. I'm a mega fan. This is the Milboro leatherflower. This is an example of a shale ridge bald. So this, instead of being just on a side slope, it's on the top of a prominence. So the soils are more stable, and thus they're able to grow this more lush prairie-like vegetation. So at this site, there is big blue stem and Indian grass, kind of like a tall grass prairie. Really, really beautiful site in Bath County. And here's another shale barren endemic plant at that same site. This is the shale barren wild buckwheat. This area is called South Sister Knob, and you can visit it on the National Forest. It's open to the public. So next, I'm going to show you some photos of wet meadows, fens, spring marshes. This one's kind of a mouthful because it kind of covers a lot of different things. But essentially, these are valley bottom grasslands. There are very few of these left. These are some of the more fertile grasslands we had. A lot of them have been tiled and drained. Most of our fertile grasslands in like the Shenandoah Valley area have been converted to other uses. So the remnants we have are very precious. So this is from Cowbane Prairie in Bath County. You can see the rattlesnake master and ironweed there. This is an example in the Stinking Creek Valley in Craig County. We've got marsh marigold and skunk cabbage. This is in a much more montane valley, and this particular system kind of counts on disturbance from beavers to remain open. But again, like all of our other megafauna, there are not as many beavers as there used to be. So in the absence of beavers, these places can become increasingly dominated by shrubs. And then lastly, this is a site on the Forest Service that they call the Dense Blazing Starfield, Liatris spicata. I'd say this is more of a mesic meadow. There were also drier prairies in these valley bottoms, but we really don't know a lot about those habitat types because those places have just been largely developed. You have to think if you were coming into a landscape and you wanted to build yourself a house and a farm, would you choose the place that is covered in trees, or would you choose a place that is open grassland? So those very developable places are what have mainly been lost. So next, I'm going to show you the sinkhole ponds. This is another very peculiar and rare grassland type. In Virginia, they're only found in the Shenandoah Valley. This site is called Maple Flats. So these are basically seasonal wetlands where the unique geology has created these depressions that at certain times of year fill up like a pond, and then at other times of year dry out and then have this open grassland vegetation. So they're home to a lot of rare species, including a lot of disjunct species from the coastal plain, which is very odd because they're very far from the coastal plain. These are also really important places for amphibians. So here's one of the rare coastal plain disjunct species. They look kind of like miniature Q-tips. It's called the seven-angled pipewort. One of the cutest plants ever, I think. Next, fire-adapted woodlands. Very common in the Ridge and Valley. This photo is from Peters Mountain in Giles County outside of Blacksburg. I'd say in a lot of ways, this is one of the most under-recognized types of grasslands because a lot of people might just call these forests, but these are truly fire-adapted plant communities that should often be more open than they are today. We know they're fire-adapted based on some of the plants that are there. Fire-adapted species of oak, like chestnut oak and blackjack oak, that have extremely blocky, thick bark are there. And also some of the common pines, like Table Mountain and pitch pine, are somewhat serotinous species, meaning that they often need fire and smoke in order for their cones to open up and release seeds. And then additionally, rare species like Peters Mountain Mallow literally require fire to germinate. So Peters Mountain Mallow is globally endemic to just this one place, and there's like 5 individuals left on Earth. It's not doing very well because it really, really needs fire in order for those seeds in the seed bank to germinate. So in the absence of fire, what's happening to these forests is a process called mesophication. Maybe you've heard this term. It basically just means that more mesic adapted tree species move in. That means species that prefer more moist conditions like red maples, beech trees, things like that. And as those species move in, they basically create a feedback loop in which their presence creates more mesic conditions, which then favor them to proliferate even more and make it harder for species like Peters Mountain Mallow or things that need more drier, sunny conditions to persist. Next, bogs. So bogs are one of the naturally small types of grasslands that we have, generally in the mountains. Again, without beavers, they can become overrun by shrubs, and those sun-loving species can be shaded out. So this is on Potts Mountain in Craig County. Got this really cool red sphagnum moss that is matching my friend's red boots here. And there are natural or native carnivorous plants here, like sundews that you can see, which are pretty neat. Here's another example of a bog in Grayson County. It's got tawny cottongrass, really cool graminoid. Next, grassy balds. I'm sure that your chapter is particularly familiar with grassy balds. Here's our one example in Virginia at White Top Mountain in Grayson County. There's a lot of debate about how grassy balds were formed. I won't get into that, but the fact remains that they are there and they have a lot of rare species in them. They are some of our most glorious grasslands, I think. So, gotta show Roan Mountain. I'm actually from Tennessee, for the record. So I also know and love Roan Mountain. So this is one of the types of grasslands we have in the Blue Ridge. Next is river scour. These are some of the most fun grasslands to explore, I think. So in a river scour habitat, the disturbance that they need to remain open comes in the form of periodic flooding from the river. And that flooding scours the banks, killing off young trees and allowing these grassland plants to thrive. So here in my hand, I'm holding big blue stem, which is like a typical tallgrass prairie species, just growing on the banks of the Maury River here in Rockbridge County. In some places, the ice scouring in the winter can be a further effect that keeps them open. So here is on the James River in Bedford County. This is one of my favorite places on earth. This is Baptisia australis that is on the side of the river. Had to access it via canoe because there's really no other way to get to it. But really beautiful kind of grassland. There's one more photo of that. I bought a canoe just so I could go to this place. It was worth it. So again, this is a kind of grassland that is still here because it just is in a place that's not very developable. But they are really susceptible to changes in hydrology from things like damming that make it so that these scouring floods don't happen at the frequency that these plants evolved to deal with. So another kind of mountain grassland in the Blue Ridge would be high elevation outcrop barrens. This is a pretty beautiful example at Buffalo Mountain in Floyd County. Buffalo Mountain is a monadnock, which means it is a mountain that is separate from the majority of its range. So it kind of sticks out into the Piedmont a little more than the rest of the Blue Ridge. It's got unique geology. This is considered an ultramafic barren. So Buffalo Mountain remains free of trees due to its weird geology and then also the extreme conditions up there that just make it a hard place for any plants to grow, let alone trees. So here's one of the rare species up at Buffalo Mountain. This is the mountain cinquefoil. This is a plant that is much more common up north, but the extreme conditions at Buffalo Mountain sort of mimic that. Another kind of edaphically maintained grassland would be a mafic barren. This is Bald Knob in Franklin County. It's in the Piedmont. We've got a really rare plant here, the Piedmont fame flower, Pemaranthus piedmontanus. It is endemic to just Bald Knob and I think one other place in North Carolina. So this is a really awesome plant. Continuing our way east, we've made it into the Piedmont. This is really where probably the majority of grasslands used to be in Virginia, but the Piedmont is also one of the most populated places in Virginia. So I want to give a major shout out to the Piedmont Discovery Center. They are an organization based in Charlottesville that are truly the experts in Virginia on Piedmont grasslands. They do an immense amount of survey work every year where they scout and document grassland remnants, literally driving on every single major road in a given county and scouring the sides of the roads for remnants. And they have found so many amazing places. I would highly recommend learning more from them. But I did get the opportunity to go out with them a couple times. So these are some pictures of their staff. Here's someone with the kidney leaf rosinweed in a roadside grassland remnant. And they also often find remnants in power line right-of-ways. Here is another Piedmont prairie remnant. This is a site that SGI is working with for our National Park Service project. This is the Spotsylvania Courthouse battlefield in Spotsylvania County. This is a somewhat degraded remnant, but it has a lot of really good native species still, such as prairie willow, which we found just 2 individuals of at the whole entire park. It really pops in fall because it's just got a really different color than the surrounding vegetation. And then here's one more photo of the battlefield in the summertime. So historic battlefields are actually a really good place to find grassland remnants because a lot of them weren't plowed and have been purposefully maintained to be open over time so that they still look like a battlefield. So there's actually quite a few examples of grassland remnants in historic places like this. So our team is working at this site to clear young woody vegetation so that the native grassland plants there can continue to thrive. Right, we're getting pretty far east now. Longleaf pine savanna. There is a lot more longleaf pine savanna further south in the coastal plain, but we do have a little bit of it in Virginia. The Atlantic coastal plain was actually listed as the world's 36th global biodiversity hotspot a few years back because it has extremely high levels of biodiversity, but it also faces severe threats to its continued existence due to human activity and the damage that we cause it. But it's cool that we have some in Virginia. This is at the Blackwater Ecological Preserve. This is one of the cutest plants in the world. It's called pixie moss. I've only seen it once before, but it's a tiny little plant. This makes it look like it's big. It kind of looks like snow or something on the ground from afar. Each individual flower is significantly smaller than a dime, I would say. Another beautiful photo of longleaf pine savanna in a different season out on the coastal plain. This is switch cane in the foreground, which is a type of native bamboo. Okay, final one. I don't think we can go much farther east than this. Dune grasslands. This is at Falls Cape State Park in Virginia Beach. Characteristic grass called sea oats. Again, a place that can't really be super well developed, but they are very susceptible to trampling from people, and things like sea level change are definitely going to have an effect on our coastal grasslands. Just one more beautiful image of a coastal grassland here for you with seaside goldenrod on the left and the patch of beech wormwood on the right, the bottom right. Okay, I hope you all enjoyed that breakneck tour of Virginia grasslands. And what I would like to take away from it, firstly, is that we have amazing grassland diversity in our region, which is something the general public I don't think knows, and I wish they did because it's a really cool thing about where we live. Another takeaway is that most of the grasslands that we have left in Virginia are types that are edaphically maintained. That means types, like I said, that have those characteristics about soil or other features where they don't rely on outside disturbance. They get that disturbance they need from the scouring of the river, or they just stay open because they're a cliff and they don't need an outside source of disturbance. But this is not necessarily representative of Virginia's historical grasslands. The largest, most extensive grasslands that we would have used to have were in the Piedmont and the valley bottoms in the Ridge and Valley. And those are the type that we have lost the most of because they were the best for development, agriculture, and things like that. So I want to end with hopefully something hopeful. Can we bring them back? I want to talk about restoration and reconstruction. So restoration, SGI defines as restoring a remnant system. But sometimes grassland remnants are so hidden that they can be hard to even detect. So I'm going to quickly tell you the story of Catoosa Wildlife Management Area in Tennessee. So about 20 years ago, the pine beetle infestation was becoming a major problem out here. So they decided to do a salvage timber operation just to get those pines off the landscape before they all began to die. What they were left with was just kind of an open treeless landscape, and they decided to experiment with some prescribed burning. So they did some thinning and some burning. They burned for a couple of successive years. So this is what that area looked like before any of this. This is the exact same spot after thinning and burning. The response of the site was just incredible. The species that came back from the seed bank no one knew that these plants even still existed on the Cumberland Plateau. Really, it was so amazing that there was like the land managers actually thought that biologists might have been sneaking out to the site at night and planting seeds because they just like could not believe that this was all there. So this is pretty amazing. This could be a possibility in our other degraded woodlands. We really don't know until we try. And I'll also say we also don't know the lifespan of the native seed bank. So that should light a fire under us a little bit, I think, to get out to these degraded woodlands and see what we can do before it's too late. So that's restoration. You have to have something to work with for restoration. Reconstruction is when we are planting a grassland from scratch where there was no grassland before. So we are planting a grassland in an old field in an area that's been plowed and is now just dirt. We're starting from scratch. So when we're doing a reconstruction, it really matters what species we are using. I don't think I have to tell you all how important native plants are. I think this group knows and appreciates that. But a sort of further element of that is when we are planning a reconstruction project, we really want to make sure that the species we use are not only appropriate for the region and the state, but even down to the county. So we like to plant things that were historically known from the county we are working in. So it takes some research. We also like to use locally sourced seeds if possible, but that is kind of the major bottleneck in this process, in that those seeds are not always available. There are lots of organizations that are trying to fill this gap, but that's going to take some time. So when we do these reconstructions, we would never choose a pre-made prairie mix of seeds that are coming from the Midwest. That is not at all what we like to do. We also don't do native warm season grass plantings. We really try and make diverse plantings that would have been at least somewhat representative of the kind of grasslands that would have used to have been there. So here's just a little example of a site we're working on with the city of Blacksburg. This is just a less than 1 acre site that we helped them design a seed mix for. They're purchasing from Ernst. We are also doing reconstruction projects in much larger sites than this. We're currently working with Roundstone Native Seed to plant thousands of acres of grasslands at national parks across the eastern US. That's a major project that we're working on that we're really, really excited about. We also do this kind of work on private lands and with other local organizations. But I also want to say even small patches of grassland can have a major impact. So this is my house and me toiling away in my garden. This is a still from this fun documentary that PBS Appalachia, Virginia put out last year called The Prairie Preacher. That's primarily about my boss, Dwayne, the prairie preacher, but I got some moments in there too. So most of the plants in my tiny little garden are things that I collected seeds from the roadside in really small numbers. I grew myself and I planted here. And I live basically in downtown Roanoke, but my little postage stamp prairie has become a total hotspot for pollinators and other wildlife. So there's just another picture of it in all its glory. My neighbors don't have anything like this. I had like multiple monarchs in my tiny little garden, and I truly believe that even tiny plantings like this can have a big impact, because in a way you are creating a stepping stone for pollinators that can help connect them to those larger remnants that we have. So really you can make a difference at any scale. That is all I have for you all tonight. I think we have plenty of time for questions. I've got my email here if you think of any other questions down the road.
Hey, thank you, Alaina. Am I unmuted? Yes.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think I did not realize some of those conditions of prairies. I wouldn't have considered, I wouldn't have looked at them and thought prairie. Our group actually has gone to the Cedars and did a tour there. And I'm thinking we probably need to check out some of these other locations that you gave us that aren't that far away. We also had the Piedmont Discovery Center. They did a talk for us last month.
Oh,
And
good.
yeah, and you're right. We really enjoyed that one as well. Let's see, do we have any questions here?
I can share this presentation so that people have like a list of all these places.
Oh, that would be great. Yeah. And we will load it up on our YouTube channel as
Oh,
well.
great.
Okay. Your list of seed, you got your sources from was it Ion Exchange and Roundstone?
So we often work with Roundstone, but we also, the list that I had on this slide was from Ernst.
Ernst,
They're,
I'm sorry. Yeah.
they're based in Pennsylvania. So we kind of choose a mix of Roundstone and Ernst frequently
Hmm.
because Virginia is a bit of a gap. Round,
I
Roundstone
agree.
has the further south things, Ernst has the further north. But there are people in Virginia working on this, but it takes a while to get
Mhm.
started.
Yeah, I think the Piedmont Discovery Center, they've started selling some seed and hope to do more in the future, is my understanding.
Yes.
There's one grower that we have, Ian of Wood Thrush Nursery, and he does collect his own seed. He'll tell you on his website which area he has collected the seed from. So that's kind of helpful. But yeah, I
Yeah,
don't really know of any local sources other than that, which
there's
is
a
a
lot of,
problem.
yeah, and the other thing is there are some local nurseries available that do offer good things. But unfortunately for these kinds of, or maybe it's fortunate, for the kinds of reconstruction projects we're doing, we're planting sites that are like upwards of 100 acres and we need, a lot of seed. So
Right.
we are sort of, counting on these big producers where we can, yeah, get multiple pounds of things, which is just too much for a lot of our small local growers, but they are a great resource for smaller plantings.
Hmm. I see someone put in the chat box the name Little Bluestem Nursery in Charlottesville, Virginia. I'm not familiar with them, but that's something maybe to check out as well. Um, do we
Great.
have any questions from anybody? Okay, I see lots of clapping hands and emojis and thank yous. And thank you. Thank you so much, Alaina.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed giving the talk and I hope I gave you all something to ponder on, maybe some sites to go visit once it's a little warmer out.
I was thinking that. I was thinking about making a list, and some of these places, as I said, are not that far away from us. Maybe even as a group, we could get together and do a road trip.
That would be fun.
Yeah, it would. Thank you. Okay, well, thanks everyone for coming, and we'll seeing a lot of thank yous still popping up, but um, let's see. Big areas burn and see what shows up before planting or plowing. I'm not sure if that's a question or not, but or a statement, but yeah, okay. I think that will
Oh,
be it. And
I, I
thanks
think that,
again.
oh, I was
Go
just going
ahead.
to respond. I think I might understand what Brent's question. I
Ah,
think he's
okay.
alluding to before jumping into doing a reconstruction, maybe see what comes up from the seed bank first, which
Mm-hmm.
is definitely a very valid approach. You never know what's in there, and it's worth doing a treatment like burning first and seeing if you release any native seeds from the seed bank before adding in other things. So that's a great point.
Okay. And he says yes, so you did understand him.
The
Um,
same grassland language.
yeah. Okay. Christopher Scully asks partnerships with SGI in the future. Where do you see yourself going in partnerships in the future with certainly the Piedmont Discovery Center, as you say, is a good group. Do you work with the Forestry Department or any of those government agencies?
Well, we've got a major partnership with the National Park Service right now. I'd say they are #1 partner right now. We're doing projects on almost 40 different parks across the eastern US. We're also always looking for other private landowners who have interest in doing grassland restoration, usually at a larger scale. Yeah, we're interested really in anyone who's interested in grassland restoration. Reach out to me via email and let's start something.
That sounds great. Okay, well, I'd like to thank everybody for coming this evening and thank Alaina. You gave a great talk and gave me a lot to think about. And I think I'll be starting my trip list. I want to see some of these places. I have a meadow on my own place, so I am very interested in them. And I don't think I saw some of those places as you were talking about as being meadows, which is, that's great.
Yeah,
Okay. Thank you. Good night,
thank you very
everyone.
much.